Well, hello there, and welcome to my mini workshop. I'm going to be talking about how to parent your anxious kids with sensory issues, something that we don't always talk about on this page. So I hope that you're able to join me. If you don't know me, my name is Natasha Daniels, and I am a child therapist, and I specialize in anxiety and OCD. So I want to tell you a little bit about how this mini workshop is going to go. I'm hoping to go for 30 minutes. It may be a little bit longer. It might be a little bit shorter. We'll see how that goes. And I want to tell you the points that I'm going to be bringing up. So we're going to be covering 3 points. 1, what is the difference between anxiety, OCD, and sensory processing? That's a huge question a lot of you had, and I want to make sure to get to it. The second one is, how do we teach our kids what sensory processing is? That is such a crucial element. And I'll talk to you about how to do that, because a lot of us, we don't do that part. Just like with anxiety and OCD, we skip it. The third and final thing I want to talk to you about today is, how do we develop skills, right? We're all here because we're like, how do we help our kids? And when you have anxiety on top of it or OCD on top of it, that's 10 times harder. So at the very end, after I go through those 3 points, a lot of you have asked me about the Super Sensory Bundle. That is being created by lemonlimeadventures.com. I don't know if you know that site. They're really good. And they are creating this crazy bundle that's only for a few days. And we're going to talk about it at the very end. I did pull out resources that I think are excellent for us, for our kids with anxiety and OCD. And so I'm going to go over that. And I also have a special gift that I'm going to give you, which is a crazy thing that I'm only going to do today. Actually until Monday for that. And we'll talk about that at the end. So stick around, because that's going to be at our wrap up. So I asked you guys if you had questions about sensory, how to raise anxious kids with sensory issues. And you guys flooded me with questions, which was awesome. You guys are always awesome. So because I'm super anal, I went and I grabbed all of your comments and I wrote them down. And then I looked at them and I was like, what are the themes that I'm seeing here? And I want to stay in my lane, because I'm not an occupational therapist. And so the sensory stuff used to be just the OT world. But then we're starting in the mental health world to say, there's a connection. There's a lot of comorbidity with anxiety, OCD, and sensory issues. And there's a reason for that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And so the mental health world woke up and said, we need to deal with sensory stuff too. So the OT world is really where sensory sits, but us who are in the anxiety and OCD world need to know about it, and we are there at the front line helping you guys, and so it's important. So I'm going to stay in my lane when we're talking, and so I picked only topics that were related to my expertise that had to do with the overlap of anxiety and OCD, and I didn't speak directly to just pure sensory. Does that make sense? So I cannot multitask at all. So Facebook Live is kind of a nightmare for me, because I don't like the distractions of comments and stuff, but they're actually really good. So what I did was I scheduled my work practice today for an hour later, so that after this Facebook Live is done, I'm going to go back, I'm going to read all your comments that you leave through this mini workshop, and I'm going to answer all of them. So please put your comments in as I talk, just because I'm ignoring it, because I want to stay focused and I can go on tangents pretty easily. I am going to go back and see them. So they are going to be very relevant. So if I'm not answering your questions as they pop up, I'm going to go back and read every single one of them and comment. So please leave them. So who has kids with sensory issues? If you have kids with sensory issues, give me a thumbs up. Let me see how many people out there are struggling with sensory issues in their kids, because anxiety and sensory issues, they go hand in hand. And if you have specific sensory issues that are happening, write in the comments, what are your kids' main sensory issues? Because I will go into that and I will address those, especially after I'm done talking. Okay, so what I did was I took all your comments and your questions and I put them in the 3 categories that I want to talk about, because those are the things that I know the most about. So I'm going to read your questions. So if you left me a question on the threads that I put in the group, I'm going to read them And I'm going to use those to kind of guide me through my workshop so that some of your questions are answered. Make sense? Now, if I don't get to your question, that either is because, one, it didn't have anything to do with sensory issues, or two, it just wasn't something that was my expertise because I'm not an occupational therapist, or somebody else asked something similar, and so I'm going to get to it. So hopefully I'll get to all your questions. So the first part of this workshop is, what is OCD, what is anxiety, and what is sensory? This is actually really important because if you don't know the difference, you're not going to know how to treat it as a parent, because I really do feel like there's the therapist, but the parent is treating it more often, like you're there 24/7. So you need to know how to treat these issues in your home. That's why I'm such a big fan of educating you with my podcast, my YouTube videos, because I feel like you could do this. You know your kid the best. You just need the tools. So Lynn asked, so I'm going to go through some questions, and then I'm going to kind of go on my little tangent of what I want you to know. Lynn asked, what kids, and I know she's on vacation, so she's not going to be able to watch this live, but she'll get my answer later. And Lynn is awesome. She's an admin for our group. So she's one of the many awesome admins in our group. She said, with kids who have social anxiety and SPD, how do you know which is the bigger factor? And I think that's actually a really good question because you kind of want to know what is the front burner issue with your kids. And social anxiety is very different than sensory overload. So if I want to go to a festival, 4th of July just happened in the States, and we went to a very busy festival with my 3 anxious kids and 1 with sensory processing disorder. So that was fun. It went a lot better than last year, but they also have some social anxiety. So if I have a pure sensory issue, my main issue going into a festival like that will be the overload of sensory input. So the noises, the sounds, that would be my primary concern. If I have social anxiety, it's not about necessarily the chaos and the input that I'm getting. It will be all the people staring at me. So you want to ask your kids, what's the worst thing about going to the festival? And that's what I always ask, right? What's the worst of blah, blah, blah? It seems really simple, but you get so many answers if you just keep going down. What's the worst thing about that? What's the worst thing about that? You'll find so much. So ask your kids, what's the worst thing? And then see if it's a sensory thing or an anxiety thing. I can go on tangents, so I'm going to try to be a little bit quicker because I do have a clock there so I can stay on topic because I want to get to all of this. Tiffany asked, chewing. Is there a way to determine when it's caused by anxiety and when it's a need for sensory input? That's a really good question too. They're all actually really good, so I'll stop saying that. Does it matter? I mean, I guess that's my response to that. In that case, does it really matter? Yeah, with social anxiety and sensory, it does matter because, are you going to be getting your kid earphones for the festival, or are you going to be talking to them about not caring about what people think? Those are 2 really different things, right? But with chewing, sometimes kids who are anxious are going and have the sensory component are going to be chewers. And there's some calming things that go with chewing and picking and pulling and all that kind of stuff too. So yeah, it's kind of an indication. My Miss 6 is a picker, and I notice that she picks more when she's anxious. Kids will chew. My Mr. 8, he will chew on things when he's bored, when maybe he's overstimulated, and when he's anxious. So just provide them with chew stuff. I don't want to go too long on the chew thing, but I know we all struggle because I see it a lot in our Facebook group. But I went through a zillion chew toys. Sounds like I'm talking about my dog. But and my daughter would just chew through them, right? Do you have that problem too? Give me a thumbs up if you're like, yes. I mean, so many products, like they chew them and it's like having a dog. Like they chew them and it's gone, and that's the problem. So the best thing that I found was this product. If you look at bracelets, and they're like ring bracelets, my daughter has not been able to chew through that. So find the thing that works for your kid. So moving on from that, I want to talk briefly about what's the difference between anxiety and sensory processing, OCD and sensory processing. So we're going to go through both. And then we're going to get into point number 2. So anxiety or sensory. I'm going to give you a situation, and then I'm going to tell you how a sensory kid would react to that and how an anxious kid would react to that. So let's take 3 situations. Well, actually there's 2 and there's one about me. Of course, right? So if you have a kid who's afraid of the toilet, a lot of us who have little kids, that's one of the first indicators of something going wrong. They're freaking out about the toilet. Or what about those auto flushers? Like, who decided that that was a good idea? Obviously not a kid with anxiety or sensory issues. Like, those are like the nemesis to both kids. Total side note, and maybe you already know this, but if you take a sticky note and you put it on top of the sensor, it won't auto flush. That can kind of help. But you can have a kid, like the end result is a kid who refuses to maybe sit on a toilet, especially a public toilet. But if we go back further and you say to your kid, what's the worst thing about sitting on the toilet? And your kid says, it's so loud, sensory. Or if they say, I'm going to get flushed down. Or if you're my kid, there's a zombie that's going to come out and bite you. Yeah, that's how it goes at my house. Then that's anxiety. So you just want to go down. I always talk about going down the rabbit hole and finding that core fear. Ask your kids, keep going. If they say, I don't know, well, what's the worst thing? I don't know. Well, if I took something away, what could I take away that would make it better? I always, just change the way that you ask. So fire alarm is the same one. People use this as a good example all the time. So if I was a kid and I'm refusing to go to school because of the fire alarm, I have that a lot in my practice. That's super common. And so we go into plan mode, like with the 504 plan, and say, we need to be notified when there's a fire alarm, or there's headphones when there's a fire alarm. But before you do any of that, you need to stop and you need to say to your kid, what's the worst thing about a fire alarm? Just ask them. And then we don't do that enough. And then your child might say, well, it's so loud, or it scares me. It's startling. So if they say it scares me, I wouldn't leave it at that. What's the worst thing about the noise that scares you? Well, I don't know when it's going to pop up. Startle. That's a startle. So that's sensory. Now, same behavior, doesn't want to go to school because of the fire alarm. And then you say to your kid, what's the worst thing about the fire alarm? Well, what if I'm in the bathroom? These are all real life examples that I get in my practice. These are how kids have responded to me. And I'll say, what's bad about being in the bathroom? Because sometimes I'm confused by these answers. And then they'll say, well, what if I get left behind? What if they don't come back for me? I hear that a lot. You would think that's a very unique answer, but I hear that a lot. So then we come up with a plan about how to make sure that they're not alone in the bathroom, or I do some cognitive restructuring and let them know that, the teacher knows you're there or whatever. But the point is, that's anxiety. So you see, I'll give you one last thing and then we'll move on from this topic. So my husband thinks it's really funny, or he doesn't do this anymore, but he used to think it was really funny that when we were going to bed, I'd go into my bedroom and then he would turn off the lights. And I would freak out because it would be like pitch black. And I'd be like, whoa, what's going on? Where are you? Where are you? And he'd laugh and he'd be really quiet. And it would freak me out. And it was like funny for him and not funny for me. So eventually he said to me, why does that scare you? I mean, who else do you think is in the bedroom? Like, why is that scary? And I said to him, it's not that I think there's a bad guy in the dark. I'm afraid that you're going to startle me. Like, I'm afraid you're going to pop up and overwhelm me. Sensory. As I do this stuff, I'm finding out that I have a lot of sensory issues. We just didn't have a name for it. I mean, you guys probably have a lot of sensory issues, and you probably just didn't know what it was until we kind of put it in a box and we say, oh, there's a name for it. Okay, that's anxiety. That's sensory processing versus anxiety. If you have a question about that, leave it in the comments and I will get to it. Moving on to OCD briefly. There is a lot of debate, not really debate, but there's a lot of misdiagnosing with sensory processing and OCD. This kind of drives me nuts as an OCD specialist because not enough people, even people who think they know, don't know the difference between OCD and sensory processing. So you wind up getting a diagnosis of one. If you go to an OT and you tell them your behavior, they might say, oh, well, that's obviously sensory processing. And if you go to an OCD specialist with sensory issues, they're going to say, oh, well, that's obviously just right OCD. That's frustrating because you're going to get different answers depending on the professional that you go to. That's not fair. So how do you do it? Because sometimes we just have to educate ourselves because unfortunately the world is not always educated when it comes to OCD. I am working on it. I'm trying to educate the world one video at a time. That's kind of impossible. The International OCD Foundation and the Mighty, they do great jobs, and they're going to educate the world a lot quicker than me. So with Just Right OCD, if nothing just feels like right, I mean, obviously, right? That's the title. The way to differentiate, because it is important, is does your child have just right issues outside of their clothes or how it feels? So other symptoms of Just Right OCD include I need to read things over and over again until it feels just right. These are kids who are really smart, but they're not doing well on testing because they're rereading and rereading. Do I have to rewrite my words over and over until it feels just right? Sometimes this also gets confused with perfectionism because it's not always perfectionism, it's just not feeling right. Do I have to say a word over and over until it feels just right in my mouth? That's not sensory at all. So you want to look for other symptoms that are related to that. Let's see. And then, okay, I need to move on because I'm running out of time for all the things I want to tell you. I'm going to tell you one more thing about OCD just right, and then I'll stop. With sensory processing, there is a sweet spot. And so there is a space where like eventually it feels good. It's just hard to find that. I know because I have some sensory issues too. So if I'm wearing clothes, it feels good and I'm done. Or if my shoes need to be a certain tightness, I find that sweet spot. It might take me forever. And with my 14-year-old who has SPD, I mean, when she was little, it was a nightmare, but she eventually would find her stuff and then she'd be okay. With Just Right OCD, because it's irrational, it never feels just right. So they also get stuck a lot easier, and there's not like a reprieve from it. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's move on because I only have 10 more minutes in my brain and I want to get more stuff in really quick. So I'll have to be a little bit more succinct. Number 2, how do you educate your kids on sensory processing? So Carrie asked, how to help a child understand their sensory issues, and Jocelyn asked, how to get kids to recognize when they're feeling overwhelmed and what their body feels like. Those are good questions. Because you asked that, I did a kids YouTube video that you can show your kids on what is sensory processing. You can go, if you have never seen my YouTube videos, you can go to youtube.com/c/anxious-toddler78, and I do kids YouTube videos, and so I have playlists. I have one for anxiety and I have one for OCD, and I put it in both because it impacts both types of kids. So have them watch that YouTube video. There are good books on sensory processing also for kids, and when I get off, I'll put links down below of some kid books for sensory processing. If your kid doesn't know what sensory processing is or why they have sensory issues, nothing will get better. I'm such a big proponent of educating kids. So definitely educate them so that you can move on. Okay, the last topic I want to talk about is how do you help your kids cope? And so we had a lot of questions about this. Ellen said, will this improve or worsen with age? I think it partly depends on you and your kid. So it's a two-parter because we can't really control our kids' journey. I talk about that all the time with anxiety and OCD. This is their journey, not our journey. But you can teach your kids and you can build skills. My 14-year-old was a nightmare. Love her, but she was a nightmare at 2 and 3. We had feeding therapists, we had OT, she couldn't eat, she was failure to thrive, she couldn't wear clothes, she couldn't wear shoes. I mean, it was a mess. We worked really hard on it. I educated myself on it and I rolled up my sleeves and I helped her directly. And she's 14 and you would not know any of that. I know because I look at her and she's never gonna wear a pair of jeans unless I find super soft ones. I found some super soft ones at Walmart for adults, and they're like cotton. So you wouldn't know that she had any issues. She has anxiety and her anxiety is in check as well, but you wouldn't know. So it can get better over time. And normally sensory issues tend to be the most intense when they're little because they haven't really acclimated to their little body. And so they're overloaded with sensory input more than you would be at 10 or 15. Karen said, how do you help your child who is overwhelmed use a sensory strategy in the moment when they feel overwhelmed? I'm going to read all of them and I'm going to go and answer them. Jessica said, how to help my son deal with sensory meltdowns in public. Those are the worst. Tiffany said, What are the best discipline techniques to make sure they're growing and learning from their mistakes but still feel loved? And Patsy asked, what's the difference between sensory meltdown and tantrum? So I'm going to go over that, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. So I think it's important to empower your kids to help themselves. And once your child's in a sensory meltdown, good luck, right? It's kind of like the same thing if they're in an anxiety meltdown. The time to fix that is not in that moment. At that point, that is containment. That is like, let me just make sure like we're going to be all okay and we're going to move on. So you want to build the skills prior to that. You want to be proactive, and you want to arm your kids with skills and tools so that they don't have as many sensory meltdowns in public or in general. So the first step to do that, and we'll just talk about it briefly, but there are so many resources we're going to go into that you can have that will help you more in depth. But I find that really, really educating my kids is a good thing. So they know what's on their sensory plate. That's important. So tell your kids, does that sound too loud? Is that too bumpy in your mouth? So you kind of articulate with them. You articulate their issues. You help give them words so that they can connect the dots. Like my kids, if you went to my Miss Six and you said, what are your supersonic powers? Because that's how we talk about it in my house. She'll say, oh, I have a superpower. My nose is really strong. So I frame it in a positive way. If you ask my 14-year-old, what's your superpower? She'll say, I could taste anything. You put a dab of lemon in there and I'm going to taste it. So they know what their sensory stuff is. So educate them first. And then there are so many ways to help them cope with the sensory overload. So if I know that I don't like the noise of crowds, then I'm going to have earplugs available in my pocket all the time. And I'm going to teach kids when noises are bothering you, you pull them out and you put them in your ears. It sounds very simple, but these are techniques that if you can get your kids to do it, they are going to learn how to, one, self-regulate, two, identify when they're about to get into sensory overload, because they know it more than they know it more than you know it, because it's their body, right? So if they have all these tools, and the tools tend to be how to cope with sensory overload, then they're going to know how to grab them when they're feeling overwhelmed. And I go into this, I have a podcast all about this, and I think it was my last podcast episode. So if you go to the AT Parenting Survival podcast, look that up. I go into detail. I go through every single sensory issue, and I talk about what you could do concrete-wise, like what skills you can build with them. But you want them to build it. If they don't like smells, then you can get like an oil diffusing necklace, and you can teach them to use that. If they don't like clothes, I talk about buying in bulk. Grab all your clothes that are good go-to clothes, put them in 2 bins. The pants, this is what I did with my oldest when she was little, because it would be a knockdown, drag out fight, right? So I would put them in 2 bins. I would say, here are your pants. And these were go-to pants. They had already been pre-approved by her sensory skin. And so she'd have her pants, and then I'd have shirts that match it. And I would change it out every few weeks so that she wasn't wearing the same 5 outfits all the time. And those were all like pre-approved by her skin. And I would say, just go get dressed. Pick 1 pants and 1 shirt. It took a while to practice, but I got out of the line of fire, and she learned what she needed to do with her clothes. So you really want to empower kids to do things for themselves. So if it's auditory, you're talking about a lot of noise blocking. If it's skin, it's them figuring out what things work for their body. If it's orals I find one of the trickier ones because we dealt with that, and it can be really scary. You want to help them desensitize their mouth and also learn what things do you not like. Oh, you don't, I would label it for my kids. You don't like that because that was smushy. Was it the smush that bothered you? Or you didn't like that because there was a lump of strawberry in there, so it was too lumpy. I would give them language so that they could say later, that's too lumpy, or I don't like crunchy, or I don't like chewy. That was chewy. So you want to give them language like we do with anything else. So those are some basic tips. There are a lot more, and I do have a lot of, more information in my podcast. So go and listen to the podcast because I go into depth a little bit more. So I briefly want to talk because we're at the end. If you have questions I did not get to, leave them in the comments because I will go back over it. I have an hour. I don't have to go into session for a little bit longer, so that's good. Have you heard about the Super Sensory Bundle? It's this week. I've been talking about it because it's a crazy good deal. Do you know what bundles are? So bundles, I didn't know this, but bundles are when a bunch of professionals get together and they get their best resources and they put it in a bundle and they almost practically give it away. So a couple years ago when I was like new to blogging, I saw a blogging bundle and I was like, what the heck is that? And then I looked through it and I was like, it was only like $29.99 as well. And I was like, I thought it was a scam. So I was looking for like, where's the scam in this? Because I'm totally paranoid. And eventually I realized it's not a scam. Like, it's just a good deal. They just, it's only for a short period of time. And then I realized, oh, that's what bundles are. I didn't know what bundles were. So they're legit. They are awesome. And they're just for a short period of time. So let me talk about the Super Sensory Bundle. You can get it. I don't know how to leave a link to the bundle because I'm obviously tech incompetent. I'll leave it in the comments, but I do have a bit.ly for it. So you can go to bit.ly, it's bit.ly/AT sensory, and you can look at the bundle as I'm talking or afterwards. But in the bundle, I actually have my ebook, and so that's a good deal in and of itself, because if you are overwhelmed like I am, you're not going to want to go on my website and look at all my articles. Before I did podcasts, I wrote a zillion articles. And so my ebook is like 273 pages of all my anxiety articles in one little place. So you get that with the bundle. And then I want to talk to you because there's 5 categories in the bundle. So I only want to talk to you about one little category. I want to show you some of the things that you get, which I think are crazy. And then at the very end, I'm going to just do this for a second. I want to tell you about something I'm going to give you for free if you order the bundle. So if you order the bundle and then you email me, only email me the bundle. I can't answer questions through email. I get overwhelmed. But if you email me at anxioustoddlers@yahoo.com and send me your receipt for the bundle, I'm going to give you something for free, which has a huge value. I'll tell you that at the very end. But I took 5 things from the bundle that I thought were really awesome. This is 5 of 49 things from the bundle. So Corey, okay, you can't really see this, but so you get these downloads and you can download all these ebooks and all these games and all these resources, or you can go to these people's websites and they give you like a code and you get all their stuff for free. It's crazy. I went through it last night and I was not able to get through any of it. I just wanted to pull some for this and I was overloaded with like, oh my gosh, this is so good for my practice. I'm going to take this. So this is a calming strategies workbook. Super cool. And it starts off with like worksheets for possible triggers that you can kind of start to track. And then it does a whole thing like a weekly tracker. You can't really see this, which is cool. And then you can figure out the trigger, the day, the time, the location. And then you can figure out how you're going to solve these problems. And then she's got calming strategy worksheets. This is the stuff that you do in therapy. This is stuff I do in therapy. Like sometimes we're trying to figure out what the problem is. And I tell parents, keep a track of it. She's got a whole book on how to do that. That's awesome sauce. Then the other thing that I thought was like incredible good value is this is normally a $15. Okay, you can't really see this, can you? Okay, so this is Teaching Emotions Toolkit, which is on her website, and it's normally $15. Well, the bundle's only $30. My ebook is $8, so it's kind of crazy how the value that you're getting. And in her Teaching Emotions Toolkit, it comes with like emotion cards, a printable poster, videos, printables, a thermometer for feelings, bingo feelings, feeling mini book. It's awesome. I'm going to print this out for my practice. So you get that. This is 5 of 49 stuff. So you get the point. All right. I feel like I don't want to take too much more time, but all right. I'll go over some of the other ones on my page, but there's Taming Tantrums. Who needs that? This is an awesome ebook. I would buy this just by itself. So you get that. There's sensory diet cards. Do you ever wonder like ideas on, these are really cute. So you get like, you can print these out and cut them up. This whole like 15 sheets of this, plus 400 printables. Okay, I'm going on and I don't want to go on too much, but you get the point. The bundle's pretty awesome. If you get the bundle, I wanted to offer you something as well. And so if you order the bundle and you email me the receipt of the bundle, just to be honest, you can get free access to my online class, How to Get Your Kids to Listen. So my online class, How to Get Kids to Listen, is $20. So, and my ebook is $8. That's $28 of my product in the bundle without even touching any of the bundle resources. That's nuts. So if you want the bundle, go and get that. And even if you just are like, well, gosh, I just want access to her free class and her ebook, that's pretty cool in of itself. And then I'm going to get $400 of other stuff just for getting that. Sign up, because this isn't going to be going on forever, because it's just such a ridiculous thing that people are going to only want to be participating in these kind of bundles for a very, very short period of time. So go to bit.ly/ATsensory. That's bit.ly/ATsensory, and follow that link, order the bundle, email me at anxioustoddlers@yahoo.com. I'm not going to put my email in the comments, so anxioustoddlers@yahoo.com, only for the receipts. Please don't email me for advice. And show me that you got it, and I will sign you up. I will enroll you in my online class, How to Get Kids to Listen. They're video classes. You can take them at any time, and it might be kind of nice for you to see what my classes are like. So I hope that you like these mini classes, this mini workshop. I kind of feel like I could do this. I was like, oh my gosh, this is my number one, like on my fear hierarchy, for my social anxiety. Facebook Live was like number one. It's like on a 1 to 10 scale of stress, it's a 10. But I'm actually feeling like I could probably do this because it's not that bad. It's just like exposures, right? Like you just do it and then you're like, it's fine. So I am thinking that maybe once a month I will do a mini workshop. And I would love to know what mini workshop you would like me to do next for a Facebook Live. So leave it in the comments. Let me know what topic you'd want to cover. Just keep it succinct. Just be like, boom, this one comment. And I'm going to, because I'm anal, I'll make a list of everything that you guys say, and then I will pick from that topic, and then I will post a thread about questions related to that topic. And in a month, maybe I'll be back. All right, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope that was helpful. If you found it helpful, give it a thumbs up or a heart, and I will talk to you later. Take care.